I'm Nathan Scott, and this is Breakdown, a series on game design. When I was a kid, something like Go Fish was probably the most complicated card game I'd ever played. So when my brother introduced me to Magic the Gathering, I was amazed by the complexity and depth that card games could have. But a lot of the appeal of Magic, aside from the complexity, is playing with your friends, trading cards with people, and going to tournaments. All of those are often more interesting, and sometimes only possible, with a physical card game. Games like Hearthstone and Eternal are digital, so they need to take advantage of that difference in format. Magic is a great physical card game, but it wasn't initially designed to be digital. When Magic Online launched, a lot of people were unhappy with it. Not everyone, of course. I mean, it still basically functioned like playing Magic in person. But the UI and even a lot of the gameplay was not designed for a digital format. It requires a lot of confirmation on their turn and waiting for your opponent to confirm things on your turn. In real life, it's a little smoother because you're both usually paying full attention to the game, but online, people often start doing other things immediately after their turn. On top of that, you have to manually confirm every single action your opponent does, whereas in real life, you would just interrupt them when you want to react to something. But games like Hearthstone have more freedom in some ways because they're digital. The best example for Hearthstone is probably Yogg-Saron, which casts a random spell for each spell you've cast that game. That card would never work in a physical card game, unless you somehow got every single spell and every card those spells could create. Eternal does a lot less with randomness than Hearthstone, but it still takes advantage of being a digital game through the mechanics. There's an ability called Warcry that says when a unit attacks, the top unit or weapon of your deck gets +1/+1. So even if the next 5 cards of your deck aren't units and the 6th card is, it will buff the 6th card down. It does that without having to rearrange the deck or letting either player see what's remaining in the deck. That mechanic wouldn't work in a physical card game. Even if you manually kept track of the number of buffs you have and then applied it when you drew a card, your opponent would know when you drew a unit. If you applied the buffs in secret, you could easily cheat and say you drew a different card first. Another mechanic called Warp lets you see the top card of your deck and lets you play it immediately, but your opponent can't see it. Aside from marking the back of your cards, which again would be cheating, that mechanic isn't really possible in a physical card game. Even if you somehow knew it was a warp card, if you look at it while it's on top of your deck, your opponent would know that it was a warp card as well, which is information you don't want to give away in case you decide not to play it that turn. Going back to Magic the Gathering, a common complaint in that game is drawing too many lands or not drawing enough lands to play the cards in your deck. About a third of most Magic decks is land, which makes people expect to draw a land about once every 3 cards. But that's not how randomness works. By definition, it's inconsistent. You could end up with your whole opening hand being lands, or you might not draw any. Eternal messes with the randomness to make it closer to what people expect. Your opening hand never has 7 lands, and it never has 0 lands. It's always between 1 and 6. You also have 1 chance to redraw your hand, and if you do that, you always draw between 2 and 4 lands, which is pretty close to the ideal number of lands most decks want to start with. Redrawing your hand is going to give you more consistency, but at the risk of not drawing better early units than the ones already in your hand. It's a risk versus reward that physical card games can't really offer. One format isn't better than another, but it's always good to take advantage of what the medium you're using allows you to do. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching this episode of Breakdown.